Um, I want to talk about two different things tonight, and in my mind, they hang together, but you may not necessarily see the connection. Uh, I'll hopefully leave some time and you can ask me about the connections if you don't see it. Um, but just to preface the talk, we did have our annual 8-day sit this past week from the last Friday in February till the morning of Saturday, the first Saturday in March. I'm losing track of the dates of it. And I think I can speak for many of us. We had I don't know, about 12 or 13 people who sat the entire retreat, and then another almost 20 people who sat pieces of the retreat. And my sense from talking to people on the retreat and also my own experience was the power of sitting still and sitting with ourselves for that intensive period of time. And at Empty Gate Zen Center, as in most Zen centers in the Quantum School of Zen, retreat practice is a big part of our practice. And at Empty Gate, we have a retreat just about every month, either a 3-day retreat, a 1-day retreat. We do one 8-day retreat. And hopefully, again, we'll be able to do a work retreat in August, which we do generally every year. And we experience that quality of practice where you're watching everything. Experientially, you're sitting with yourself, your experience is arising and passing, and we're observing and we're watching. And in many ways, there's many different ways to talk about meditation. But one thing that can happen when we're meditating is we can recognize cause and effect a little more clearly. If we get on a topic and we're looking at situations in our lives, we get a chance to watch how they arise, what goes on. Maybe even we get to see how our actions interact with the situation and the cause and the effect of things. We just get to observe everything. And it gets quite deep, honestly, just that relentless watching, taking away stimulation. You know, a lot of what our minds get wrapped around about is whatever is new and being stimulated in our mind. It's as if you can think of our minds as a still pool, and if a pebble gets thrown into the pool, there are all these ripples. Without the pebble, there are no ripples. So some little event, some thought, some feeling, some interchange with someone drops into the pond, and all of these ripples begin. We start to think about them, and we have this action, this feeling, and that feeling, and things become very complicated very quickly. So on retreat, we get to watch that. And really what I want to talk about today is how we also get to watch that in our everyday life. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to tell you a little story about something that happened to me this morning and how I practiced as I was going through this. So, as every situation in our lives seemed to be, this is kind of complicated. I'm going to try not to get bogged down in too many details, but I guess you need to know a little context. So I was planning a trip and I was buying some plane tickets, and I have some miles available to buy the plane tickets. So yesterday in the evening, I started searching and I found that I could use these miles and for myself and my wife, and I bought the tickets with miles. And then at the very end, they offer you a few extras. And since the plane trip wasn't costing too much, I decided to take one of the extras, a different seat. So I clicked the button on the website that says, if you have a travel credit, book a ticket. So I clicked the button and I started booking my ticket. And when I got to the end, I saw that it didn't look like they were they were using my travel credit. They were just going to charge me the cost of the ticket. This is even more detailed than you need to know. But it's important because I'm a big part of this story. So I decided, since I know that airplanes change the price on tickets all the time, I decided better lock in the ticket. And then tomorrow I'd call the airline and I would probably have to cancel it and we'd reticket it. But at least I would have a base to start with. So I woke up this morning with the intention of immediately getting on the phone to call the airline, because when you call the airlines these days, you don't get to just talk to somebody. Now they want you to give your telephone number and they'll get back to you. On Sunday, I tried this and they told me they'd get back in 3 hours. And I didn't like that. So I didn't do that. But I decided as soon as I woke up, I'd get online, I'd get on the phone and I'd start the process. Well, it's on me. I forgot until an hour later. So I said, okay, I better do it now. So I call the airlines and they tell me it's going to take about 40 minutes for them to call me back. Now my morning, which I had a few hours to do this, now I have 2 hours. And at the end of this, I've got to start working all day. So as I'm waiting and they're a little bit late, already the tension is rising. So in the context of practicing in our daily life, I want you to hear that already I'm practicing. I'm aware of the energy in my body. I'm aware of what I've done to create the situation that I'm now about to try to solve. And I'm just aware of my time frame. I'm aware of what I want to happen. And already it's not going the way I want it to go. I watch. How am I reacting as it's not going the way I want it to go? Again, this is an insignificant, unimportant story. And that's why I'm using it, because really there's nothing to lose here. I mean, actually, it was about $175. Just so you know, that's what we're dealing with. So I finally start talking to a person, and she doesn't really understand what I want. So we keep talking, and she's quite nice, and I'm trying to be friendly and nice with her. But after a while, she's not giving me what I want. And again, I notice my energy rising. I can hear the impatience in my voice, and I can hear the way I'm speaking to her. And I know that's not the way I want to be speaking with her, nor is it the way that I think will be of any help to anybody in getting what I want done. So I'm very quick to apologize. I understand you don't make the rules, you're just following what you have to do. So we continue on, and that happens a few times. And I'm watching. I'm aware of how my energy is rising. I'm aware of how I'm responding to that rising energy. I'm aware of my anger and how I am putting it out to the person on the other end of the phone. Each time I'm aware of it, I breathe a little bit. I try to bring the energy down into my lower abdomen, just the same instruction that Marshall gave for meditation instruction. That's what I was working with this morning. Just I was trying to breathe, and I was trying to bring my energy down. What I notice about myself, and I think it's true probably for many of us, when we get agitated, when we're not getting what we want, or when I'm not getting what I want, my energy starts to rise. I get shorter, I get more impatient, and sometimes I get mean, or what I feel like is mean. I don't think I generally get too mean, but I can get critical, and I can be pretty strong. So you don't always want to be on the other end of my disapproval or disappointment with what you're doing. And I'm aware of this, so I'm watching. And again, remember why I'm telling you this. This is Zen practice in our daily life. This happens to all of us all the time. Something's going on and we're having to deal with it, and we're having to watch our energy. So finally, just to finish this part of the talk, finally we get as far as we can get. I came up with an idea that worked with a different airline in a not quite the same situation, but similar enough. Split the tickets, just cancel mine, and then we'll redo mine, and I'll be able to use my travel credit, and everything will be great. So she says, fine, we're going to do that. So she's come and gone. It's now probably been about 45, 50 minutes that we're going through this. I've watched all of my break disappear. I had plans on going out and getting some exercise, getting a walk in, getting into the sun. All that time frame is gone. Now I'm getting closer and closer to when I'm going to have to hang up because I have an appointment. Again, you can hear it. So the energy rises with all of this. Cause and effect. Zen Master Bon Soeng used to say, when we're practicing, cause and effect are clear. He didn't say cause and effect disappear. In fact, there's an old koan where a Zen teacher told somebody that cause and effect disappear when you're enlightened, and as a curse for his bad speech, he was reincarnated as a fox for 500 generations. So we're not talking about getting rid of it. We're talking about being able to be clear about it, to perceive it, and be able to respond to it as close to the moment as we can. So I finally get to a solution, and the woman leaves, and she comes back 5 minutes later, and she says, we're almost done, but I don't have the authority to do this. I have to bring in my supervisor to do it. So I said, okay, if that's what has to happen, that's what has to happen. So once again, now I say goodbye to her because she's going to be gone. Remember, she's gone back and forth to her supervisor. So another 5 minutes later, the supervisor gets on the phone and she says, hello, Mr. Kitses, how can I help you? And I said, what? I said, don't you know what we're here for? And then she hemmed and hawed a little bit, and we did get back to the point. And in about 3 minutes, she said, oh, you're not allowed to do that. You can't use your travel credit for that kind of charge. You just can't do it. It's against the rules. I said, okay, but why didn't you tell that to the woman who came to you 40 minutes ago and asked you about this? She would have told me, and we would have been done. Again, I don't even remember what she says at this point. I was a little bit more huffy, and we got off the phone. And that was the end. And then what ended up the result was the original tickets that I had bought remain the tickets I bought, and I can't use the flight credit that I want to use. Really no big deal. I'm saving a lot of money with miles anyway. But all through this, I think you're getting the point. All through this, things are coming up that I need to monitor. I need to be clear about what, not only what the other, that there's a human being on the other end of the phone, not just some object that I can say anything I want to or abuse in any way I want to. I have to be aware that there's a human being. In my language, I'd say Buddha is on the other end of the phone. So if I'm not treating Buddha in the way that I feel I should treat Buddha, that's on me. I've got to manage my frustration, my need, my understanding of the situation. I mean, I have a whole narrative about this situation, but that's not shared by the person on the other end of the line. And practice means being aware of the intricacy of the moment and being present enough to monitor ourselves, myself in this case, and be able to work with the energy as it's coming up to hopefully make the situation as positive, I suppose, as I can, not just for me, but for the people that I'm dealing with. We can do some of that on retreat, but in our daily life, we always have the opportunity to practice. Many of you have heard me say this when we chant the four great vows. In some schools of Zen, the third great vow is chanted, Dharma gates are endless. We vow to enter them all. This small, insignificant experience that I'm talking about is a Dharma gate. Once I make the phone call, I'm bringing somebody else into my drama. And that person on the other end of the line, they're supposed to help me. And I knew all along, this, especially the first woman I was speaking with, she really did want to help me, but there were limits. But every time I bumped up against that limit, I had a response. And it was my job to monitor my response and to modulate my energy as best I could to treat this person like Buddha, not like an object whose job is to take care of me. See, the self-centered view is my thing is the most important thing. And this world is all about taking care of my thing. But when we're practitioners, we're aware of the interconnection of all things. Nothing is left out. And to treat anything other than with the respect that we would treat Buddha is treating the other as an object of less importance than me. Now, in reality, of course, we do this all the time, every day. But we're practitioners. Our job is to be present in our life and be able to navigate these situations, not perfectly. It's not about doing it right from the beginning. It's about being able to modulate, to see what's happening as it's appearing, to know ourselves well enough and be in contact with ourselves that we can feel the energy and modulate and respond in an appropriate way. Now, obviously, it's much easier for something that's quite insignificant than a different situation that, let's say, we have more skin in the game, or there's more, the implications can be quite big. So that just increases the amount of energy that we have to deal with. And again, I'm not suggesting the point is that we do it in some right way. All I'm trying to say here is that practice means we try. And trying means we stay as present as we can, as observant as we can, and as clear as we can with our energy. I'm leaving a lot of room for more or less to happen. It's not about, it's nice if we get a good result, and that feels good and we like that. But I'm not focusing at all on the result. I'm focusing on the process. Practice is process. Zen practice is not an objective thing to get right. Zen practice is a process to live in our lives. And that really is the main point I want to make. That our practice is not something that we do to get some particular result at the end. Practice is everyday life process and the ability to be present and clear enough to work with the experience in a more helpful way. Sometimes we do well at it, sometimes we do poorly at it. We like doing well at it, we don't like doing poorly at it. And sometimes when I do poorly at it, I make a mess for myself. So now that's the next cause that I have to deal with. And I guess the last thing I want to say about this story is I hope you heard how I needed to take responsibility for my actions. I knew from the beginning that I did some things that made this complication happen. Now, as it turned out, there's also learning. I know that when airlines change their prices all the time, and the main reason I made the decision to make the reservation is because I knew if I waited especially I think once they saw that I had looked for this reservation, it would be different. And as it turned out, had I canceled the reservation, it would have been another $200 from 7 o'clock at night till 10 o'clock in the next morning. So I had that information. That information made me, or I used that information to decide to do something. That action that I did created another complication that had to be dealt with. I can't deny the fact that I did what I did. I would do it again but I do have to acknowledge that I created the complication. And so many times in the hour that I was on the phone, I wanted to forget that. It's much easier to look at what they're doing and how intransient they are and their stupid rules and all the things that they're doing. It's much, much more difficult to turn it around, not blame myself. Like I said, I would do it again. But I have to own that I did it. And I have to recognize my part in a very complicated situation. And I honestly think that's the hardest practice point, to be able to be open and honest enough to own my own part. So there's such a knee-jerk tendency to see the fault in others and to miss what I'm doing. So to me, that's a critically important piece of practicing in our everyday life. Okay, pause, second topic. I've been talking about this topic for the last few weeks, and at the risk of boring you, I'm coming back to it one more time. And it has to do with what's been coming up in the war with Ukraine and Russia. And I really want to make the point again. I am not talking about right and wrong here. I'm not talking about who's right and who's wrong. I have my very own strong views, but I'm not talking about right and wrong here. I'm talking about what I think of as frame and narrative. If some of you remember, I said last week and maybe even the week before, when I started watching the coverage of the beginning of the war on TV, at a moment, about an hour in on the first night, I had this thought, I guess it's a thought, that the news broadcasters are framing this situation for me. They use certain words that create certain reactions. Like last night, just for example, I heard one of the newscasters call the Ukrainian fighters brave. Now, probably objectively you can say that's true, but my mind from that very first night has gone back to the coverage that I watched when the United States invaded Iraq. And when the United States invaded Iraq, the coverage never said those brave Iraqis who are standing up to the onslaught. They never talked about the sadness and grief of the refugees who were having to leave their homes due to our bombing. Again, I'm not talking about whether it's good or bad to do what's happened. Cause and effect is cause and effect. But so much of the time in our lives, the frame is being set for us, and we don't even realize it's happening. I had a high school English teacher in 12th grade, and she gave us an assignment. She had everyone pick an article from a newspaper and go through the article and see how the article was slanted and how the article was trying to get you to see a certain way. And it was so eye-opening because it was all there. It's often very subtle, but frame of reference and belief about something is so easily colors the communication about it. In a way, you can say, Any adjective is a frame of reference. One person's beauty is another person's ugly. One person's good is another bad. So a beautiful flower or a stinky flower. The flower is the flower with its own characteristics. That's our teaching of truth. Truth is just like this. A flower is a flower. If it's a blue flower, it's a blue flower. If it's a red flower, it's a red flower. But if I prefer blue to red, then I'm making a hierarchy and I'm separating things into better and worse. That's human. We do that. But we're practitioners. A practitioner needs to be aware of how the frame is being set, because we human beings suffer from something that's called confirmation bias. If I believe something, then I see the world through the lens of that belief. And whatever confirms that belief gets taken in as another brick in the wall of my belief. And anything that creates a little dissonance about it somehow gets discarded. And we ignore it. Or what I've noticed in myself, sometimes I'll make a rational mistake, but I'll change what it is in order to fit the narrative. So if it's, and I'm making this up, if it's something on a stick, but I think that stick is a flower, as crazy as this might sound, that thing that's topping what I think of as a stem becomes the head of a flower. And my mind will really believe that it's a flower because that fits my narrative. That's what human minds do. One more time, we're practitioners. We need to be aware of how our own frame of reference impacts how we see the world. So if we're trying to see clearly, which is always the injunction that we're told, see clearly, hear clearly, smell clearly, taste clearly. In order to see clearly, our eyes need to be free of our own biases. And if we're not aware of our biases, we can't separate them. So you can hear again, I'm not suggesting we need to get rid of our biases. We only need to understand them and be aware of them so that when they're in operation, we have some room. You know how we say, don't know mind, and a lot of you have done Kung-on work, you understand. And we say this is like hitting the clear button on a calculator. Return to zero and see clearly, understand clearly, respond clearly. This return to zero is not something we do once and we're done. It's something we do moment to moment to moment to moment. Just like I talked about in that story, I continually had to hit. I continually had to return to don't know. That's practice in our daily life. And that practice allows us to be curious, but also skeptical. We call this great doubt. Great doubt, we sometimes say, what am I, is great doubt. Being curious and wondering about the world. Being willing to acknowledge my own biases is a piece of great doubt. When I hold great doubt, it means I'm always looking. Are you sure? How do you know that? Where does that come from? And very often, I find that I have these ideas only because somebody told me. When I was in my mid-20s, I lived on a commune. And on this commune, I was younger than just about everybody else. Well, there were a bunch of kids who, of course, I was older than, but I was the youngest adult. Everybody else was about anywhere from 5 to 10 years older than me, maybe even a little bit more. So, they had a little more knowledge, a little more wisdom. They'd been around the block a little more. And even though I had my own hubris, I was kind of aware that they knew things that I didn't know. They knew a lot about farming and building, things that I wanted to learn. So the man who owned the commune, who had put the money down for the property, I remember him saying that it was a good thing to put coffee grinds down the drain. That when you put coffee grinds down the drain, that's a good thing for your drain. Now, for all I know, that's true. But almost every time I make coffee in the morning, and whatever I haven't gotten in the compost is going down the drain, I remember that, yeah, he said that it was good to put the coffee grinds down the drain. When I look at it, I have no idea if that's good. But I could imagine that if I was at your house, I might tell you, yeah, it's good to put those coffee grinds down the drain. How many times in a day do we say things that we really don't know? Somebody told us, and it stuck in our minds, and we believed it. So now it's truth. Being a practitioner means keeping great doubt, becoming aware. For me, one of the most joyful experiences of a day is seeing that I made that up about the coffee grinds, or that I really don't know. To have my assumptions blown open. Then I have to look. Then I have to listen. Then I return to don't know. Then I'm more intimate with what I'm doing. Once I started questioning my idea about the coffee grinds in the drain, one of the things that happened was I started trying to be a little more careful, making sure to get more of the coffee grinds into the compost bucket. So it has small, tiny things. But we humans are choking ourselves and choking this planet by our activities. And unless we're aware, unless we're challenging our assumptions about things, we just act unconsciously, and in maybe a Gurdjieffian point of view, we act like robots. We lose our freedom because we're acting out of unconscious ideas and beliefs. And our practice is about bringing things into our awareness. When I was doing a master's thesis for my psychotherapy program, I came across, I think it was D.T. Suzuki, who was talking at a psychoanalytic conference in the 1950s. And he said, you could say that enlightenment is making the unconscious conscious, bringing into our awareness what has left outside of our awareness. Now, in truth, we most likely can't bring all of our unconscious into awareness. But the more we do, the clearer we are, the more able we are to find freedom in our lives. And remember, Buddhism and Zen is about liberation. It's about freeing ourselves from our self-centered beliefs and ideas and the chains that hold us in the small box of I. And in order to do that, we have to make aware what is outside of our awareness. That's why in so many different forms of Buddhism, you'll always hear this point of awareness. And there's one Burmese teacher who talks about awareness of awareness. So it's not only being aware, but being aware of what you're aware. That's presence. That's aliveness. That's connected to the moment.